Do you believe you chose to watch this video? That you decided of your own free will to click play? Today we're going to explore one of the most unsettling challenges to that intuition, the determinist position on free will. Fair warning. By the end of this exploration, you might find yourself questioning everything you thought you knew about choice and agency. The question of free will has captivated philosophers for millennia, generating libraries of dense academic debate. But the determinist challenge cuts through much of that complexity with a deceptively simple claim. Every event in the universe, including every thought in your head and every decision you make, is the inevitable result of prior causes, stretching back to the beginning of time. Now, before we dive deeper, let's be clear about what we're examining here. Determinism isn't some fringe philosophical position. It's a serious intellectual framework that deserves our careful attention, whether we ultimately accept it or not. Consider the determinist's central argument. Your brain is a physical system, composed of neurons firing according to the laws of physics and chemistry. When you decide to have coffee instead of tea this morning, that decision emerged from a cascade of neural activity. But here's where it gets interesting. That neural activity was itself determined by your genetics, your past experiences, your current blood sugar levels, the amount of sleep you got last night, and countless other factors entirely beyond your control. The determinist would ask, if all these contributing factors were outside your control, in what sense did you make the choice? You might as well say that a calculator chooses to output 4 when you input 2 plus 2. Now your immediate response might be, but I feel like I'm choosing. The determinist has an answer for this too, and it's not particularly comforting. Of course you feel like you're choosing. The illusion is remarkably sophisticated. But feelings, they would argue, are not evidence of reality. Consider this analogy. A person experiencing schizophrenia might feel absolutely certain that the voices they hear are real external entities speaking to them. Their subjective conviction is genuine and powerful, but it doesn't make those voices objectively real. Similarly, the determinist suggests, our feeling of free choice might be a compelling neurological illusion, rather than evidence of genuine agency. Let's push this further and examine what the determinist calls the ultimate responsibility problem. Think about your most fundamental preferences and characteristics. Why do you love the music you love? Why are you attracted to the people you're attracted to? Why does chocolate taste delicious to you, while cilantro might taste like soap? Why are you naturally introverted or extroverted? The uncomfortable truth is that you didn't choose any of these core aspects of yourself. They were shaped by your genetic lottery, your early childhood experiences, your cultural environment, your neurochemistry, none of which you had any say in selecting. You are, in a very real sense, the product of forces that preceded your ability to make conscious decisions. If this is true, if your preferences, values, and fundamental personality traits were determined by factors outside your control, then how can you be ultimately responsible for the decisions that flow from those predetermined characteristics? It's like being held responsible for the output of a computer program you didn't write, running on hardware you didn't design. The determinist position gains additional support from neuroscience. Studies by researchers like Benjamin Libet have shown that brain activity indicating a decision begins several hundred milliseconds before people report being aware of their intention to act. More recent studies have pushed this even further, with some researchers claiming they can predict certain simple decisions up to 10 seconds before the person reports making them. What are we to make of this? The determinist interpretation is stark. What we experience as conscious decision-making might actually be our brain's post-hoc rationalization of processes that have already been set in motion by unconscious neural activity. But let's examine some of the more profound implications of the determinist worldview. If free will is indeed an illusion, what happens to moral responsibility? Can we meaningfully praise someone for their kindness or condemn them for their cruelty if their actions were ultimately inevitable? The determinist might argue that praise and blame are themselves part of the causal chain. They're environmental factors that help shape future behavior. We don't punish criminals because they're ultimately responsible in some cosmic sense, but because punishment serves as a deterrent and potentially reforms behavior. The system works, even if our traditional justifications for it don't hold up under scrutiny. This leads us to what might be the most psychologically challenging aspect of determinism. If it's true, then everything that makes you distinctly you, your achievements, your failures, your moral choices, your creative insights, None of it truly originated from some essential self that stands apart from the causal flow of the universe. You didn't earn your talents any more than you earned your eye color. You didn't choose to be born into the circumstances that shaped your character. You didn't select the neurochemistry that influences your moods and decisions. In this view, you're not the author of your own story so much as you are the story itself, being written by forces far beyond your control or comprehension. Yet here's where the determinist position reveals its own strange paradox. If determinism is true, then your acceptance or rejection of determinism itself is also determined. You can't choose to believe it, any more than you can choose to believe that 2 + 2 = 5. The evidence and arguments either compel belief or they don't, based on the particular configuration of your brain and experiences. This creates an odd recursive loop. If I've presented the determinist case effectively and you find yourself convinced, that conviction isn't really yours in any meaningful sense. It's simply the inevitable result of a particular set of neural processes encountering a particular set of arguments. And if you reject determinism, well, that rejection too is always going to happen given who you are and what you've experienced. So where does this leave us? The determinist challenge to free will remains one of the most profound and unsettling questions in philosophy. Whether you find it compelling or repugnant, liberating or terrifying, it forces us to confront fundamental questions about the nature of choice, responsibility, and human agency. If you want to dive deeper into these ideas, some of the most compelling voices in this debate are worth exploring. Robert Sapolsky, the Stanford neurobiologist, makes a particularly rigorous case for hard determinism in his book, Determined: A Science of Life Without Free Will. Sam Harris offers a neuroscientist's perspective in Free Will, while philosopher Dirk Pereboom presents sophisticated philosophical arguments in Living Without Free Will. For a broader historical perspective, Paul Holbach's The Illusion of Free Will remains influential, and Jerry Coyne's You Don't Have Free Will provides an accessible entry point to these ideas. These thinkers don't all agree on every detail, but they share the conviction that our common-sense notion of free will simply cannot survive serious scrutiny. Whether they're right is something each of us must grapple with, though according to their own position, our conclusion was inevitable from the start. Perhaps the most honest position is intellectual humility. The question of free will touches on the deepest mysteries of consciousness and causation, mysteries we're still far from solving. But exploring these ideas, wrestling with their implications, and questioning our most basic assumptions about ourselves, that might be one of the most essentially human things we can do, even if we're not ultimately free to do otherwise.